It was a regular Wednesday morning when Maya Lockwood laced up her sneakers and stepped out for her usual jog through the neighborhood park. The same route. The same breeze. The same playlist humming through her earbuds. At 27, she had just gotten promoted at the law firm, was in the early stages of planning a destination wedding, and had just adopted a golden retriever named Sky. She had no idea that everything, every carefully stacked piece of her life, was about to shatter in less than 5 minutes. Maya was the kind of person people trusted easily. The friend who remembered birthdays. The sister who flew home every Christmas no matter how hectic work got. The fiancé who left sticky notes with love quotes on the fridge. Her world was one of predictability and warmth, and maybe that's what made what happened next so unthinkable. It was just after 7 a.m. when she got back from her run and called out for Ryan, her fiancé. No answer. She assumed he was in the shower, but the apartment was too quiet. Sky, their usually bouncy puppy, was whimpering by the bedroom door. And that's when she opened it. The moment is something Maya still refuses to speak about in exact terms. The visuals come back in pieces. Flashes. Red. The unnatural tilt of Ryan's body on the bed. His eyes, frozen in a blank stare. There was no scream. Just a low, animal-like sound that came out of her chest. She backed into the hallway wall and slid down, unable to move. Ryan was gone. The shock didn't let her process the rest until the police came. A forced entry. A struggle. A violent end. And worst of all, it wasn't random. That's when the real unraveling began. In the days that followed, Maya could barely stand. Reporters swarmed the front of the building. Her name was in headlines she never asked for. Friends dropped by and left casserole dishes, unsure of what to say. The police were tight-lipped, but one thing was clear. Ryan hadn't died in his sleep. He had been targeted. And someone had been watching them. Maya stayed in the guest room of her sister's apartment, barely speaking. She deleted all social media. She couldn't listen to music without remembering how she had been jogging, smiling, while the man she loved was being killed. The guilt nearly swallowed her whole. In a heartbreaking turn, it emerged that Ryan had been helping a coworker escape an abusive relationship. She had been hiding for weeks, and her partner had been tracking her. Somehow he believed Ryan was involved. That he was protecting her. He had chosen that morning. That window. That moment. The news played it all as headlines. Jealous rage ends in murder. Good Samaritan lawyer slain protecting client. But for Maya, it wasn't a story. It was the sound of Ryan's toothbrush still in the holder. The unread text she had sent while jogging. The wedding Pinterest boards she couldn't bring herself to delete. And worst of all, the irrational spiral in her mind. What if I had come back sooner? What if I had called? At night, sleep was a myth. When she did close her eyes, the images returned. She tried therapy but couldn't speak more than a sentence without breaking down. She refused to go back to the apartment. Sky was given to a friend. Every inch of her life had been infected with the memory of that moment. But as the weeks bled into months, something inside Maya refused to stay in that collapse. Her first act of reclaiming her life came in silence. She went back to the park. One slow step at a time. The same route. The same breeze. No earbuds this time. Just the sound of her breath and the knowledge that she had survived. Not untouched. Not healed. But standing. She started journaling, not about the crime, not about Ryan, but about the small things she still noticed. A child laughing on a swing. The way light filtered through the trees. The feeling of her heartbeat returning to a steady rhythm. And from those pages came something unexpected. A new version of Maya. One that didn't deny the horror but wasn't defined by it either. She spoke to Ryan's parents for the first time in 4 months. They cried together, not about the trial or the sentencing but about Ryan's favorite foods, his weird sense of humor, the time he tried to bake a cake and set the oven on fire. Pain was still there. But so was love. What Maya didn't expect was that Ryan's story, and her survival, would begin to echo. She was invited to speak anonymously for a domestic abuse support podcast. She agreed reluctantly. Her voice shook, but her words were clear. And something about speaking, about owning her story, not as a victim but as someone who made it through, unlocked a new kind of strength. She wasn't healed. Not completely. But she was no longer hidden in the wreckage. She was moving through it. And then came the letter. A plain envelope. No return address. Just her name on the front in shaky handwriting. Inside, a message that would shake the fragile peace she had begun to build. You weren't supposed to be out that morning, but you were lucky. I wasn't coming for you, yet. Her hands trembled. She reread it 3 times. Everything she thought was over, might just be beginning. Maya stared at the letter until her eyes blurred. The handwriting was uneven, deliberate, as if the writer had taken their time, wanting each word to land with weight. You weren't supposed to be out that morning, but you were lucky. I wasn't coming for you, yet. The word yet pulsed in her brain like a ticking clock. Her fingers went cold. Her breath shallowed. She dropped the envelope like it burned her. For a long time she didn't move. The walls of her sister's apartment, which had become her safe place, now felt unfamiliar, exposed. Her mind spiraled. How did they find her address? Was this real? Could it be a cruel prank? Or was someone really watching her all this time? Maya had tried so hard to build a fragile sense of normalcy. Therapy had helped. Routine had helped. The act of surviving one quiet morning at a time had helped. But this letter, this threat, unraveled months of slow healing in seconds. Her sister found her sitting on the hallway floor, gripping the edge of the carpet like it was the only thing keeping her tethered to reality. She didn't speak. She simply handed her the letter. There was no longer a question of should we tell the police. It was now who had sent it, and why now. But the authorities had little to offer. The case had already concluded. The man responsible for Ryan's death, the ex-boyfriend of the woman Ryan had helped, had been convicted and was serving life. The investigation was closed, the danger supposedly neutralized. So who had sent the letter? A copycat? An obsessed follower of the case? Or someone else involved who had never been caught? The detective they spoke to promised to look into it, but Maya could see it in his eyes. They thought she was overreacting. A grieving woman, traumatized, possibly misreading a bad joke as a real threat. But Maya knew. The tone. The intent. It wasn't a prank. It was personal. And worst of all, they knew she wasn't home that morning. That detail hadn't been made public. She started checking windows, unplugging devices, sleeping with the lights on again. Her appetite vanished. Her heartbeat became a permanent thrum in her ears. The paranoia wasn't irrational anymore. It was survival. Her therapist tried grounding techniques. Her sister tried distractions. But Maya withdrew. She began to journal again, this time about fear. The paralyzing kind. The kind that whispers when you walk into a room. That lingers in the silence between footsteps. That makes you memorize every exit, every shadow, every stranger's face. A week later the second letter came. This time it wasn't threatening. It was mocking. Don't look over your shoulder, Maya. I'm not there. Not today. No envelope. Just a slip of paper tucked under the windshield of her sister's car. Now it wasn't just the past haunting her, it was her present. Her sister installed cameras. Maya changed her phone number. She stopped going to the park. She stopped going anywhere. Her body was functioning, but her spirit had frozen in place. She thought about Ryan constantly. Not just who he had been, but what he would do if he were still here. He had always been calm in chaos, a natural protector. She imagined his voice telling her not to let this person take more than they already had. So one night at 3:13 a.m. she did something different. She recorded herself. A video. Just her and the front-facing camera. No script. No makeup. No walls. She talked about fear. About grief. About what it felt like to be haunted by someone who didn't want her dead. Just unraveled. She didn't post it. Not yet. But it helped. For the first time in weeks she slept. And then, it stopped. No more letters. No knocks in the night. No threats tucked beneath wipers or slipped under doors. It was like the shadow had passed. But Maya couldn't trust that. She began to live in the in-between, the purgatory of fear and hope. Of watching over her shoulder and pretending not to. Of locking windows twice but still checking them again. But healing, she realized, doesn't wait for full safety. It grows quietly in the middle of fear. So she decided to post the video. The response was overwhelming. Not from tabloids or true crime addicts, but from survivors. People who had been stalked, threatened, haunted. People who knew what it was to live in the aftershock of someone else's violence. They thanked her for saying what they couldn't. For being raw. For not pretending. The more she spoke out, the more the fear began to lose its grip. Not because it was gone, but because it no longer controlled the story. And then, almost 3 months after the second letter, came the package. No name. Just a brown box with no return address, left on her sister's doorstep. Inside was a USB stick. No note. No explanation. Maya called the police immediately. They took it in for analysis, promising to check for fingerprints, tracking data, anything. Days passed. Then a call came. The detective's voice was tight. There's footage on the drive. Of you. Walking in the park. From behind a bush. We've confirmed the date, 2 days before the first letter. Maya's blood turned to ice. The man who took Ryan from her wasn't the end of the story. Someone had been there. Watching. Waiting. And now they'd made themselves known. The detectives called it surveillance footage, but Maya knew what it really was. Stalking. She sat in the precinct's cold interview room, watching herself on the monitor, walking alone in the park, earbuds in, oblivious. The camera wasn't still. It moved with her. It paused when she paused. It followed her until she turned a corner and disappeared from view. The footage was time-stamped. 2 days before the first letter. He had been that close. The officer beside her muted the video and said gently, "He didn't approach. He didn't touch you. But he was watching. That's enough. We're taking this seriously now." Maya almost laughed, not because it was funny but because now they were taking it seriously. Now that it was undeniable. She felt exposed in a new way. This wasn't just about fear anymore. It was about control. Someone out there wanted her to know that she was never really alone. That even her quietest, most healing moments were never truly hers. The police dusted the USB drive. No usable prints. The package had no postage, no store-specific tape, no DNA. The cameras on the street were either turned away or conveniently offline during the time it was dropped. Professional, the officer muttered. Or careful, Maya thought. Back at home, the dread thickened. Her sister kept suggesting they move again, maybe even out of state, but Maya refused. If she kept running, the person behind this would win. And she didn't want to feel hunted for the rest of her life. She wanted to confront the silence. Break it. So, she started researching cases like hers. Cases where convicted killers had accomplices or silent supporters. There were always outliers, people who romanticized murderers or claimed to understand them. Online forums. Fan letters. Even secret visits. Ryan's killer, Darren Miles, had been a controlling, manipulative man. The kind who drew people in with charm and masked cruelty. Could he have had someone on the outside who still believed in him? Someone enacting his twisted revenge? She started connecting dots. The park. The letters. The timing. And then she found something. A comment on a lesser-known blog about the case. A post about Ryan's heroism. Among the praise and grief was one comment that stood out. She thinks she survived. But the story's not over. She's just in Act 2. It was posted 3 days before the first letter arrived. The user's profile was anonymous. No photo. No links. But the wording sent chills down Maya's spine. Act 2. Like this was some performance. And she was still on stage. She reported the post to the police. Their cybercrime unit flagged it, tracked the IP, and sent it for deeper analysis. Maya waited. Every day felt like standing in a burning room and being told to just breathe. Then the detective called again. "We found a match," he said. The comment was posted from a library computer in the next town. No surveillance footage of who used it, but what? Maya's voice shook. "There's a second comment from the same user. Posted last night." She didn't speak. Act 3 begins when she stops looking. That's when it ends. She felt like the wind had been knocked out of her. The message wasn't about hurting her. It was about breaking her. Making her question her reality. Forcing her to live under the weight of constant anticipation. That was the goal. Psychological suffocation. And it was working. The police offered a protective detail. Maya declined. She didn't want to be surrounded by uniforms that made her feel like a prisoner in her own life. Instead, she set up her own form of defense, a body cam. Always on. Always recording. A digital diary in case something happened. She began filming everything, her walks, her routines, her therapy sessions with consent, her thoughts in the middle of the night. It wasn't content. It was evidence. Insurance. Control. And then something shifted. One of the videos she posted online, a vulnerable entry about how it felt to live in fear, caught attention. Not from trolls or true crime obsessives, but from a woman named Lena. Lena said she had been in a similar situation. Not the same case. Not the same stalker. But the same pattern. The slow burn. The gifts. The letters. The threats that never crossed into physical harm, only psychological warfare. Maya reached out privately. They talked for hours. Lena told her about the man who had harassed her for almost a year. He had never been arrested. He had never left fingerprints. But she knew it was him. And eventually he just stopped. But the damage never really left. Maya asked her something she hadn't said out loud before. "How do you trust your own safety again?" Lena paused. "You don't. Not right away. But eventually you trust yourself more than the fear." That's the only way it starts to loosen. It was the first real piece of hope Maya had felt in weeks. But it didn't last. Because one morning, when she opened her front door to get the mail, there was a single rose on the welcome mat. No note. No box. Just a perfect, blood-red rose. She hadn't told anyone about the roses. Not even the police. It had been Ryan's thing. He used to leave one for her on her birthday every year with a handwritten card. The last one had arrived the day before he died. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. Someone new. Someone close. Someone who wanted her to feel haunted by love. And that meant it wasn't random. It was personal. The rose. It sat there like a quiet scream. A single stem read as a warning, placed not just on her doorstep, but in her memory. Whoever had left it didn't just want to scare Maya. They wanted to remind her of him. Of Ryan. That made it personal in a way nothing else had. Because that detail wasn't public. Not in the interviews. Not in the case files. Not even in therapy. Only a few people had known about Ryan's rose tradition. His sister. Their closest friends. And Maya had told the story once, to one person, early on in grief counseling. She didn't want to believe it could be someone she knew. But the message was clear now. They were already inside the circle. She picked up the rose with gloved hands, placed it in a plastic bag and drove it straight to the police station. The officers there were quiet, more serious than usual. Something in the air had changed. Stalkers don't usually escalate this way unless they want attention or results, the lead detective said. But this feels ritualistic. Maya nodded slowly. It feels like he's trying to rewrite the ending. As if Ryan's death wasn't enough. Later that evening, Maya opened a notebook and started writing. She listed every person who had attended Ryan's memorial. Every person who had reached out after his death. She cross-referenced social media accounts, looked for odd interactions, changed behavior, hidden posts. She thought of Callie, Ryan's ex-girlfriend. The one he never really talked about. The one who had shown up at the memorial with red eyes and no apology. Maya remembered how she hugged her too tightly. Whispered, he always loved red roses. It had been a strange moment. But now, it felt loaded. Could it be Callie? Maya shared the name with the detectives. They looked into it. No history of mental illness. No restraining orders. No current connection to anyone in law enforcement, tech, or criminal records. But when they pulled Callie's phone logs, something popped. She had made 5 calls to a number registered to a prepaid phone. That same burner had pinged near Maya's apartment building the day before the USB was found. It wasn't proof, but it was enough. Detectives paid Callie a visit. She denied everything. Claimed the burner belonged to a friend she no longer spoke to. Said the rose tradition was a thing everyone knew, because Ryan used to do it even back in college. Her story was smooth, emotionally steady. Too steady. And Maya wasn't buying it. Still, without hard evidence, the investigation stalled again. It was a brutal pattern. Fear, hope, a thread of truth, and then nothing. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was the unpredictability. The waiting. Because when something doesn't happen, your mind still keeps playing what could. One night, while going through her storage bin, Maya stumbled across something strange. A box of old photo albums, the ones Ryan had scanned into a digital archive before he died. She hadn't looked through them in years. She sat on the floor, flipping page after page, past childhood birthdays, awkward teen years, college house parties, and then she stopped. There was a photo she had never seen. A group picture. Ryan, a few college friends, and someone standing just slightly out of focus on the far edge. Someone with a camera around their neck. Someone whose face she couldn't quite make out. But the posture, the shape of the hands, felt familiar. She zoomed in. Enhanced. Still blurry, but a name scratched faintly on the back of the photo helped. Caleb took this one. 2014. Maya frowned. Caleb. He had been in the background of Ryan's stories. Photography major. Quiet. Friendly enough but a bit intense. Ryan hadn't spoken to him in years. But what if that wasn't true? She dug deeper. Found Caleb's old Instagram account, now inactive, but linked to a new portfolio site under a different alias. The work was eerie. Urban decay. Empty hallways. Park benches. Doorsteps. And then, buried in the gallery, a photo of her. Not recent. Maybe a year ago. Walking down the street. Headphones in. Smile soft. The caption read, "The face of memory. The shape of loss." Sometimes beauty doesn't know it's being watched. Maya's heart pounded. This wasn't admiration. It was obsession. She screen captured everything. Sent it to the police. The pieces were clicking into place. And then came the email. No subject line. Just a single image attached. It was her asleep on the couch. Taken from inside her apartment. Maya dropped her phone. Oh. She had changed the locks. Installed cameras. Upgraded the alarm system. Unless. She turned slowly toward the small vent above the bookshelf, something she had ignored for months. She pulled over a stool, climbed up, and opened the grate. There, tucked into the corner, was a tiny lens. A hidden camera. It had been there the whole time. She stumbled back, stomach churning. Her body felt foreign, like her skin wasn't enough protection anymore. She was never alone. And someone, possibly Caleb, had found a way inside her life. Inside her home. Watching, recording, controlling. But if he had been that close, if he had gotten in, what else had he left behind? The hidden camera changed everything. Maya no longer felt like a survivor. She felt hunted. For weeks, she told herself she was healing, sleeping through some nights, starting to eat again, forcing smiles at work. But the photo of her asleep, the camera in her vent, it shattered the fragile sense of safety she'd fought to rebuild. The police returned, this time with urgency. They swept her apartment with equipment Maya had only seen in spy movies, RF detectors, thermal scanners, and frequency blockers. The results left everyone stunned. 3 more cameras. 1 in the bedroom smoke detector. 1 behind a light switch. 1 cleverly tucked inside a fake electrical outlet in the hallway. Each wired to transmit data remotely. Each installed with expert precision. This wasn't improvised, the lead investigator said, eyes scanning the room. This was planned. That word stuck in Maya's mind like splinters. Planned. Not random. Not impulsive. She'd been studied. Chosen. Targeted. The forensic team managed to trace the data stream to a relay server. It was encrypted, but a location ping revealed something chilling. The signal bounced frequently through a storage facility 5 miles from her apartment. Warrants were filed. The facility manager was cooperative. Officers arrived that afternoon and opened the unit tied to the data stream. Inside they found a compact workstation, laptop, external hard drives, blueprints of Maya's apartment, surveillance schedules, and hundreds of photos of her. Sleeping, eating, laughing, crying. Captured over months. But the most haunting detail wasn't the images. It was the journal. A leather-bound book with neatly dated entries. Written by hand. Obsessive, poetic, disturbed. She doesn't know how beautiful she is when she's afraid. But I know. I see it. I love her most when she's vulnerable. When she thinks no one's watching. They all think it ended with Ryan. But they're wrong. Ryan was the beginning. She just doesn't understand yet. The last entry was dated 2 days before the rose appeared on her doorstep. Soon she'll realize we're connected. Not just by him. By grief. By loneliness. By the silence in between. I just need her to stop resisting. The journal was signed, C. But it wasn't enough for an arrest. The unit had been rented under a fake name, the cameras were purchased with cash, and the fingerprints were inconclusive, just 1 partial print on the corner of the journal's cover. Still, everything pointed to one name, Caleb Warren. A former classmate. A quiet observer. A photography student who never graduated. He had dropped out 2 semesters after Ryan's death, moved 3 times in 5 years, and kept a near-invisible digital footprint. But Maya remembered him now. He had been in the background of so many photos. At parties. Study sessions. Even that one birthday dinner Ryan threw for her. Never loud. Never involved. Just there. Looking back, she remembered a time Ryan casually mentioned how Caleb gave him the creeps. He's not dangerous, Ryan had said with a shrug. Just odd. Watches too much. Now Maya knew he hadn't been watching Ryan. He'd been watching her. Detectives issued a bolo for Caleb. His last known residence, a sublet apartment downtown, was abandoned. Clothes gone. Devices wiped. Mail stacked at the door, untouched for a week. He'd vanished. And Maya? She couldn't sleep. Couldn't shower without checking behind the curtain. Couldn't walk down her street without feeling eyes on her back. The police assigned a patrol to drive by her building twice a night. A caseworker offered her counseling. Friends called more often. None of it helped. She moved out. Found a short-term rental with better security, 3 floors up, no easy access. Still the nightmares followed. In them Ryan's voice was distant, distorted. Telling her to run. Telling her it wasn't over. One afternoon a delivery man buzzed her door. She hadn't ordered anything. He handed her a sealed box with no return address. Just her name, Maya R. written in delicate handwriting. She hesitated before opening it. Inside, a silver frame. No photo. Just a typed note, perfectly centered. A new home needs new memories. I can help make them. Let me in. Maya dropped the frame, glass shattering across the floor. The apartment's security system had shown no breaches. But now she realized how easy it had been before. He'd been inside once. What stopped him from doing it again? She called the detectives immediately. They picked up the package, tested it for prints. Again, nothing usable. But they found a small transmitter embedded inside the frame. It had been pinging nearby cell towers every 4 minutes, silently mapping the surrounding network. He hadn't just delivered a message. He had tagged her. Somewhere out there, Caleb knew exactly where she was. Her breathing became shallow. Her chest tight. She felt like she was underwater, sinking into fear so deep it muffled everything around her. I want him caught, she said that night, voice shaking on the phone. I don't care if it takes a year. I want him found. The detective paused. We think we're close. Maya looked up. What do you mean? He explained that Caleb had made a mistake. One of the external drives from the storage unit had a hidden partition. Inside were photo files, over 5,000 of them. GPS embedded. Some tagged with metadata from a camera phone that had once been registered to a burner used by Callie, Ryan's ex. They were connected. But there was more. One of the GPS tags showed an unfamiliar location. A remote area near the lake outside the city. A small cabin. Off the grid. Registered under an LLC that didn't exist 3 months ago. Maya gripped the edge of the table. Are you saying, you know where he is? The detective's voice dropped to a whisper. We think so. But if we're wrong, we may be walking into something we're not prepared for. It was early morning when the officers approached the cabin. The air was thick with tension, the kind that clung to your skin and made every sound feel louder than it should be. Leaves crunched underfoot. A dog barked in the distance. And somewhere deep inside, Maya felt the weight of everything building to this moment. She wasn't there in person, of course. She waited miles away, phone clenched tightly in her hand, every muscle in her body wound tight. The detectives had promised to call the moment the operation was over. But waiting felt like torture. The cabin was real. Tucked behind a line of trees near a lake, far enough from the main road to avoid suspicion. It looked abandoned, paint peeling, windows shuttered. But inside was something else entirely. The SWAT team moved in quickly, quietly. A hidden generator hummed beneath the floorboards. Inside, multiple monitors lined the walls, each screen rotating through surveillance feeds. Cameras pointed at roads, gas stations, parks. Some showed static. Others, live footage. And one showed Maya's new apartment building. He had found her. Again. In the center of the room sat Caleb Warren. Calm. Unarmed. Waiting. He didn't resist. Didn't ask why they were there. He simply looked up and said, she finally listened. The officers placed him in handcuffs. They read him his rights. And as they led him out, he turned to one of the detectives and whispered, you'll never understand what it's like to love someone who doesn't see you. I gave her everything. All of me. And still she shut the door. That was his defense. Well, twisted. Obsessive. Possessive. At the station, investigators finally got their answers. Caleb admitted to installing the cameras. To following Maya for months. To accessing her emails, her social media, even her private journals. But he denied hurting Ryan. No, he said. That was never the plan. Ryan just got in the way. According to Caleb, it started long before Maya ever noticed him. He'd seen her at a campus poetry night. Heard her read something about grief and healing. It moved him. Or more accurately, it consumed him. He watched her from that moment forward. The photos. The recordings. The notes. All part of what he called his long-term connection plan. He believed that once Ryan was gone, Maya would become emotionally open, a phrase he repeated as if it were a therapy term. But Ryan's death, he insisted, was a tragic coincidence. Still, no one believed it was just coincidence. Prosecutors began building a case. Stalking. Harassment. Breaking and entering. Multiple counts of privacy violation. And though the evidence around Ryan's death was circumstantial, the journal entries and timing painted a disturbing picture. Maya, through all of it, stayed strong. She testified at the pretrial hearing. She faced Caleb across the courtroom, his eyes fixated, hungry, unblinking. But she didn't flinch. I am not your victim, she said. You do not own my story. The crowd was silent. The judge later praised her courage in his final remarks before Caleb's sentencing. Though they couldn't prove Caleb murdered Ryan, the weight of his crimes was enough. He received a 15-year sentence with no chance of early parole. But for Maya, the journey wasn't over. Even after the trial, she battled anxiety, distrust, and the echo of fear in every shadow. Yet she also found something unexpected along the way: resilience. She began speaking out. At universities. At women's safety events. She used her voice, the same voice that once read poetry in a quiet college hall, to tell her story. "I lost the person I loved most," she told one audience. "But I didn't lose myself. And I won't let fear define the rest of my life." In time she wrote a memoir. In the Walls, Reclaiming My Life After Being Watched. It became a symbol of survival, of finding light after darkness. She moved to a new city, closer to her sister. She went back to therapy. And slowly she began living again, not just surviving. The nightmares became less frequent. The shadows less menacing. The voice she heard in her dreams, Ryan's, turned from warnings to comfort. She began to feel his presence not as a loss but as a guide. And when she finally visited his grave on what would have been their anniversary, she didn't cry out of pain. She smiled, whispered, "I'm okay now," and left a single sunflower. It was over. Not in a way that erased what happened, but in a way that proved she had endured. Because sometimes the moment your world collapses doesn't destroy you. Sometimes it builds you back stronger. Thank you for watching The Moment Her World Collapsed in Seconds. A true story of survival, obsession, and reclaiming one's power. If this story moved you, please like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. We tell real stories that matter, stories that stay with you. And remember, your voice matters. Your safety matters. You matter. Until next time, stay safe and stay aware. Subscribe now for more gripping true crime documentaries.